Continue to come in on the big court verdict reached yesterday in former Sangamon County Sheriff's Deputy Sean Grayson's murder trial. It's Thursday evening. I'm Tyler Lopez.
And I'm Janice Rebholz. Thanks for joining us at 5. The president of the local NAACP is sharing the disappointment with the Sonia Massey family that her killer could avoid prison. Now, after an 8-day trial, former Sangamon County Sheriff's Deputy Sean Grayson is convicted of second-degree murder by the Peoria jury for shooting Massey in July 2024. Massey's family disappointed, saying he deserved first-degree murder as a conviction. NAACP President in Peoria, Pastor Marvin Hightower, says the video evidence and the testimony was clear that Grayson deserved a more serious consequence. He believes the system needs reform, adding justice was not served.
Justice was done with injustice. It's unfair that an officer can say that they simply feared for their life to be able to take another life as a perceived threat when in reality, like his partner testified, he was actually the threat.
Hightower also criticized the makeup of the jury, saying it may have been unfair to have only one African American on the jury out of 12. He believes the verdict, though, sends a message that officers do have to face consequences for their actions. Now, Sean Grayson faces 4 to 20 years in prison, although probation is a possibility when he goes before a judge again in late January, but the chances of that are slim.
And